Captain Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars drift past like ancient memories. The ship moved through space with the quiet hum of peaceful exploration, carrying its crew of historians and scientists to yet another dead battlefield. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had known perfect peace under the Galactic Council's rule. The bridge was quiet except for the soft beeping of instruments. Dr. Park So-young sat at her station, studying data from their last stop, a moon where two species had once fought over mining rights 5,000 years ago. Now it was just another historical site marked with memorial plaques and visited by school groups. "Captain, we're approaching the Velnari border," called out Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-woo from her station. "They've cleared us for passage to the archaeological site." Lee Daeho nodded. The Velnari were a crystalline species, beautiful and peaceful like everyone else in the modern galaxy. Their ships looked more like art pieces than vessels of transport, all smooth curves and glowing energy patterns. No weapon systems, of course. No one had mounted weapons on civilian ships for thousands of years. "Commander Kim Taemin, prepare the survey equipment," Lee Daeho ordered. Kim Taemin looked up from his console. Once he had been trained as a military officer, back when humanity still maintained small defense forces for asteroid cleanup and space rescue work. Now he studied old battles like archaeologists studied ancient pottery. "Survey drones are ready, sir. The battlefield should give us good data on pre-council warfare tactics." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had visited dozens of such sites, always finding the same thing: crude weapons, basic strategies, primitive thinking. The ancient galaxy had been a violent place, full of species that solved problems with force instead of words. It seemed impossible that civilized beings had ever lived that way. Dr. Park So-young pulled up images from their last mission on her screen. "Look at this weapon design from the Kethmaran ruins," she said, showing the others a twisted metal device. They actually built tools designed only for killing. No secondary purpose, no peaceful applications, just pure destruction. The crew gathered around her station, studying the ancient relic with the fascination of people examining dinosaur bones. It was hard to imagine that thinking beings had once created such things. "The psychological profiles are fascinating," Park So-young continued. "These ancient warriors showed increased aggression, territorial behavior, and hierarchical pack structures. Complete opposite of modern civilized development." Lee Daeho studied the weapon image. Something about its design seemed familiar, though he could not place why. "Any species still show these traits?" "Only in historical records," Park So-young replied, "though humans have the most complete archives of warfare tactics and strategies. Our ancestors kept very detailed records before the Great Peace began." Commander Kim Taemin laughed. "Good thing we grew out of that phase. Hard to imagine humans as warriors." The comment drew chuckles from the crew. Modern humans were known throughout the galaxy as the best diplomats, mediators, and peacekeepers. When species had disputes, they called for human negotiators. When historical conflicts needed study, they consulted human scholars. Humanity had become the galaxy's memory keepers and problem solvers. Their peaceful work was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the Galactic Council. Admiral Choi Sun-mi appeared on the main screen, her face serious despite her usual calm demeanor. "All human vessels, this is Priority Alert 7, she announced. "We have a situation developing in the Outer Veil region. Multiple species are claiming territorial rights to a newly discovered energy source. Diplomatic solutions have been unsuccessful." Lee Daeho frowned. Unsuccessful diplomacy was almost unheard of in the modern galaxy. "How unsuccessful, Admiral?" "Several species have mobilized their historical defense protocols," Choi Sun-mi replied. "They're actually moving ships into formation and making threats. The Council has requested human mediation, but the situation is unlike anything we've seen in 3 millennia. The crew exchanged glances. Defense protocols meant military action, something that existed only in museums and history books. The very idea seemed impossible. "What species are involved?" asked Dr. Park So-young, already pulling up cultural profiles on her computer. 17 different groups led by the Velnari Empire, the Admiral replied. "They claim the energy source is necessary for their homeworld's survival. The other species want equal access for trade and development. Normal negotiation channels have completely broken down." Commander Kim Taemin studied the tactical display showing ship movements in the Outer Veil. "Admiral, these formations don't make sense. They're clustering their entire fleets together with no support structures or backup plans. I know, Choi Sun-mi said grimly. They're trying to recreate military strategies from historical databases, but they don't understand how any of it actually works. It's like children playing with tools they found in their grandparents' attic. Lee Dae-ho felt something stir in his chest, a sensation he could not identify. What are our orders? Proceed to the outer veil and establish peaceful dialogue, the Admiral instructed. Use standard mediation protocols. The Council is confident that human diplomatic skills can resolve this before it escalates. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in unusual silence. The crew began preparing for their new mission, but something felt different. The quiet efficiency of their archaeological work was replaced by a strange tension. Yoon Ji-woo ran diagnostics on ship systems with unusual thoroughness. Kim Tae-min studied star charts and fleet movements with intense focus. Park So-young pulled up every file they had on the involved species, analyzing their historical conflict patterns. As the New Horizon changed course toward the outer veil, Lee Dae-ho noticed his crew working with energy he had never seen before. They moved faster, spoke more directly, seemed more alert. Even their casual conversations had changed, focusing on ship capabilities and tactical considerations rather than historical curiosities. The change worried him, but also excited him in ways he did not understand. 3 days later, they reached the edge of the disputed zone. Long-range sensors showed dozens of alien ships arranged in crude battle formations, occasionally firing warning shots at each other while broadcasting threats in 17 different languages. "Captain," called Kim Tae-min from his station. "I'm reading weapon signatures from those ships. They've actually armed civilian vessels with military equipment." "Impossible," Lee Dae-ho replied automatically, then looked at the sensor data himself. It was true. Peaceful trading ships and exploration vessels had been fitted with energy cannons and missile systems. Dr. Park So-young looked up from her analysis station, her face pale. "Captain, according to their communication intercepts, they're not just threatening each other. Some of them are actually planning to fight." The word hung in the air like something dangerous and alive. Fight war. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone in the galaxy was preparing to kill someone else on purpose. And deep in his chest, Captain Lee Dae-ho felt something ancient begin to smile. The first shot was fired at 14:37, standard galactic time on a Tuesday, Lieutenant Bay. Hyun-woo watched from the bridge of the human diplomatic ship Harmony as the Velnari vessel Crystal. Dawn fired its main cannon at the Kethmaran mining station Prosperity Point. The energy beam struck the station's outer ring, tearing through hull plating that was never designed to withstand weapons fire. "My God," whispered Captain Nam Min-ho, staring at the tactical display. They actually did it. The Kethamaran station began broadcasting distress signals in 17 languages, but the Velnari ships were already moving into attack formation. Their movements were clumsy and uncertain, like actors performing a play they had only read about but never rehearsed. Bae Hyun-woo recorded everything, his training as a diplomatic observer taking over despite the shock of watching the first act of violence in 3 millennia. The Velnari ships moved in a straight line toward the mining station, their formation tight and predictable. They fired their weapons at maximum range, wasting energy and revealing their positions to anyone with basic sensors. "They have no idea what they're doing," muttered Communications Officer Jung Hye-jin from her station. "They're broadcasting their attack plan on open channels." Captain Nam Min-ho activated the emergency transmission system. "This is Harmony to all vessels. Cease hostile actions immediately. Human diplomatic forces are prepared to mediate this dispute." The response came from the Velnari flagship, its crystalline commander speaking in the musical tones of his species. "Human vessel, our homeworld dies without this energy source. We cannot allow others to claim what we need for survival. Please withdraw." "Commander, we can negotiate resource-sharing agreements," Nam Min-ho replied. "Violence is not necessary." "Negotiation has failed," the Velnari responded. "We must take what we need." The mining station's defense systems activated, automated shields and warning beacons designed to protect against asteroid impacts and space debris. They were useless against military weapons, but the Kethmaran had nothing else. 700 miners and their families lived on Prosperity Point, working peacefully until this moment. Bae Hyun-woo watched the tactical display as more Velnari ships approached the station. Their weapons were crude reconstructions of ancient designs, built from museum blueprints by craftsmen who had never seen real combat. But crude weapons could still kill. The Kethmoran miners began evacuating to their emergency shelters, following safety protocols designed for equipment failures and natural disasters. They moved slowly and calmly because they had never imagined that other beings might want to hurt them on purpose. Harmony, this is Admiral Choi Sunmi, came the transmission from Earth. Report status immediately. Captain Nam Minho activated the secure channel. Admiral, the Velnari have opened fire on Kethmoran Prosperity Point. They're using reconstructed military weapons against civilian targets. The miners are trapped. Casualties? Bae Hyunwoo checked his sensors. Unknown, Admiral. The station's communication array was hit in the first strike. We're reading atmosphere leaks from multiple sections. There was silence on the channel for several seconds. When Admiral Choi Sunmi spoke again, her voice carried a tone that Bae Hyunwoo had never heard from any human before. Something cold and sharp. Observe and record only, she ordered. Do not interfere directly. Full diplomatic immunity protocols are in effect. The channel closed, leaving the Harmony's crew to watch helplessly as the attack continued. More Velnari ships arrived, followed by vessels from other species who claimed territory in the Outer Veil. The Thexara Collective sent a small fleet to protect their interests. The Mordian Federation dispatched ships to ensure fair resource distribution. Within hours, the space around the mining station filled with armed vessels from 17 different species. They're all pointing guns at each other, observed Jung Hye-jin with disbelief. None of them know what to do next. The aliens seemed as shocked by their own actions as everyone else. They had mobilized for war, but had no experience with anything beyond the opening moves. Ship formations changed constantly as commanders tried to remember tactics from history books. Communication channels filled with confused requests for clarification about rules of engagement that no living being had ever practiced. The situation exploded when a nervous Thexara weapons officer fired at what he thought was an incoming missile but was actually a Mordian supply drone. The supply drone exploded, damaging 2 Velnari ships and killing 14 crew members. First blood, whispered Captain Nam Minho, and something in his voice made Bae Hyunwoo look at him with new eyes. The Mordians immediately retaliated against the Thexara fleet. Their targeting was terrible and their tactics were worse, but they had weapons and they were angry. The Thexara tried to flee while returning fire, creating a chaotic battle that spread across 3 sectors of space. More species joined the fighting, some to defend allies and others to protect their own ships from the spreading chaos. Ancient treaties and trade agreements dissolved as fear and confusion took over. Civilian vessels tried to escape, while military ships that had never seen combat opened fire on anything that looked threatening. Lieutenant Bae Hyunwoo sent constant updates to Earth, but his reports seemed inadequate to describe what he was witnessing. How do you explain the death of 3,000 years of peace in language that has no words for concepts like enemy or battlefield? The Harmony received an emergency transmission from President Seo Min-ji herself, speaking directly from Earth's capital. All human vessels in the Outer Veil, you are authorized to defend yourselves but not to initiate contact with hostile forces. Observe, record, and report. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Understand? Madam President, Captain Nam Minho replied, but Bae Hyunwoo noticed that his captain's hands moved to weapon controls that had been inactive for centuries. The fighting continued for 6 days, spreading to 4 star systems as more species chose sides or were forced to defend themselves. The casualties mounted into the thousands as beings who had never imagined violence tried to kill each other with weapons they barely understood. By the end of the first week, the Outer Veil conflict had destroyed the longest peace in galactic history, but Lieutenant Bae Hyunwoo noticed something troubling in his reports to Earth. The humans were not responding with the usual diplomatic urgency. There were no emergency peace negotiations, no immediate intervention forces, no desperate attempts to restore order. Instead, he received instructions to maintain observation positions and collect detailed tactical data on all participating forces. On his private channels to other human ships in the region, Bae Hyunwoo heard conversations that made his skin crawl. Human officers discussed alien weapon capabilities with professional interest. They analyzed battle formations with the eye of experts evaluating student projects. They spoke about casualty figures with the detachment of mathematicians working through equations. "Sir," he finally asked Captain Nam Minho during a quiet moment on the bridge, "why aren't we stopping this?" Nam Minho looked at the tactical display showing 17 different species shooting at each other, with incompetent fury. When he smiled, Bae Hyunwoo saw something in his captain's expression that had not existed in the human face for 3,000 years. "Because," Lieutenant Nam Minho said quietly, "for the first time in 3 millennia, this is interesting." Admiral Choi Sunmi stood in the command center of her flagship, the Seoul, watching real-time feeds from the Outer Veil conflict. 20 human ships had arrived in the region under the banner of Peacekeeping Task Force 7, but peace seemed impossible as the alien fleets continued their clumsy war. "Admiral, the Velnari have formed an alliance with the Thexara," reported Commander Oh Jae-sung from the tactical station. "But the Thexara are also negotiating secretly with the Mordians to betray their new allies tomorrow morning." Major Han Sung-ho looked up from his marine briefing materials. "Ma'am, they're changing sides faster than we can track. The Zenthori claimed neutrality 6 times this week, while selling weapons to everyone." Choi Soon-mi nodded, studying the tactical display. 17 species had divided into 43 different alliance groups that shifted every few hours. They fought with passion but no understanding. Like children playing war games with real weapons. "Show me the latest engagement," she ordered. The main screen displayed yesterday's battle between a Velnari strike force and a Mordian defense fleet. Both sides had deployed their entire available forces in single formations, holding nothing in reserve. The Velnari attacked in a straight line while the Mordians formed a defensive circle, neither side using scouts flanking maneuvers or tactical depth. "They're going to get themselves killed," muttered Major Han Sung-ho, watching Mordian ships cluster together so tightly that a single missile could damage multiple vessels. "Not our problem," Admiral Choi Soon-mi replied, but something in her voice suggested she was trying to convince herself. Dr. Park So-young had joined the task force as a cultural advisor, bringing her expertise in alien psychology and historical warfare patterns. She worked at a station filled with captured weapons and intelligence reports analyzing the enemy capabilities. "Admiral, I've examined the weapons systems they're using," she reported. "These are museum pieces. Literal exhibits pulled from archives with instruction manuals translated from dead languages. Most of their crews have never fired these weapons except in training simulations." "How bad is their tactical knowledge?" asked Commander Oh Jae-sung. Park So-young pulled up a series of battle recordings. "They're using strategies from textbooks, but they don't understand the principles behind them. Watch this Thexara flanking maneuver. They moved their entire fleet to one side of the enemy, but left their supply lines completely exposed and their main formation without support." The human officers studied the alien tactics with growing amazement. Every engagement showed the same pattern. Species trying to recreate warfare they had read about but never experienced. Using equipment they did not fully understand. Following strategies they could not adapt when circumstances changed. "It's like watching historical reenactors try to conduct a real military campaign," observed Major Han Sung-ho. The comment drew nervous laughter from the crew, but Admiral Choi Sun-mi felt something stirring in her chest that was not amusement. She had spent her career managing peaceful exploration fleets and diplomatic missions, but looking at the chaos in the Outer Veil, she found herself thinking in terms that had no place in the modern galaxy, terms like tactical advantage and strategic positioning and elimination of enemy forces. The situation reached a crisis point when intercepted. Communications revealed that the Velnari were preparing to activate an ancient superweapon called the Star Render. According to their transmissions, they had found the device on their homeworld and believed it would give them decisive victory. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Lee Soo-jin, "we're receiving intelligence from our contacts in Velnari space. They've located something called the Star Render in their planetary archives, but they don't know how it works. They're planning to activate it within 72 hours. Dr. Park So-young went pale as she pulled up historical records. "Admiral, I found references to the Star Render in our oldest databases. It's not a weapon. It's a planetary engineering tool that was abandoned because it destabilizes space-time. If they activate it without proper understanding, it could consume entire solar systems." "How many people are in the affected area?" asked Major Han Sung-ho. 14 billion across 6 inhabited systems, Park So-young replied. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The aliens were not just fighting an incompetent war. They were about to accidentally destroy a significant portion of the galaxy through their own ignorance. Admiral Choi, Sunmi felt something snap into place in her mind. Like a puzzle piece she had not known was missing. For the first time in her career, she was facing a problem that could not be solved through diplomacy, negotiation, or peaceful mediation. For the first time in 3,000 years, a human military officer was facing a situation that required force. Communications? Open a channel to the Galactic Council, she ordered. Council Speaker Velthera appeared on the screen, her crystalline features showing strain and fear. Admiral Choi, we need human intervention immediately. The situation has exceeded all peaceful resolution protocols. Speaker Velthera, what exactly are you asking us to do? The question hung in space for several seconds before the council speaker replied. We formally request that humanity assume military command of all forces in the Outer Veil region. You have authorization to use any means necessary to prevent the activation of the Star Render and restore stability to the region. Admiral Choi Sun-mi felt her crew's attention focus on her like a laser beam. For 3,000 years, no human had held military command over non-human forces. For 3,000 years, no human had been given authorization to use force against other species. For 3,000 years, humanity had chosen peace over the alternative. Understood, Council Speaker. We accept command authority. When the transmission ended, Admiral Choi Sun-mi turned to face her officers. She saw something in their faces that had not existed in human expression for millennia. The focused attention of predators who had just caught the scent of prey. Major Han, prepare your Marines for combat operations. Commander O, recall all human vessels to battle stations. Dr. Park, I need complete tactical profiles on all hostile forces within 6 hours. Admiral, asked Communications Officer Lee Soo-jin, what do we tell the alien fleets? Choi Sun-mi looked at the tactical display showing 17 species engaged in chaotic combat across 4 star systems, threatening to destroy billions of lives through their own incompetence and ignorance. She smiled, and her officers realized they had never seen their admiral smile quite that way before. Tell them that the professionals have arrived, she said, and they can either stand down voluntarily or learn why humanity spent 3,000 years studying war instead of forgetting how to fight it. For the first time since the Great Peace began, human warships powered up their weapon systems not for training or ceremony, but for combat. And across the fleet, 3,000 years of carefully suppressed instincts began to wake up. The human intervention began quietly. Captain Lee Dae-ho received his new orders while orbiting the Velnari homeworld. Observe, gather intelligence, and prepare detailed tactical assessments of enemy capabilities. Nothing in the orders mentioned combat, but something had changed in the tone of command communications that made his crew move differently. Commander Kim Tae-min, what's our status on the Velnari fleet movements? He asked. Kim Tae-min studied his sensors with the intensity of a hunter tracking prey. Sir, they've clustered their entire home defense force around the Star Render facility. 47 ships in tight formation, no patrol routes, no early warning systems. They're sitting stationary while they work on activating the weapon. Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-woo looked up from her station. Captain, I'm monitoring their communications. They're broadcasting technical discussions about the Star Render on unsecured channels. Anyone with basic translation software can listen to their entire activation procedure. Dr. Park So-young shook her head in amazement. They're violating every basic principle of military security. It's like they want their enemies to know exactly what they're doing. Lee Dae-ho felt that strange stirring in his chest again. Stronger now. Prepare a full tactical report for Admiral Choi. Include fleet positions, communication protocols, security weaknesses, and recommended infiltration routes. The words came naturally, though he had never spoken them before. Infiltration routes. Military security. These concepts felt familiar in ways that should have been impossible for a peaceful explorer. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Bae Hyun-woo watched from the diplomatic ship Harmony as the chaos in the Outer Veil continued. The Mordian Federation had launched what they called a decisive strike against Thexara positions, but their entire attack force moved in a single group with no supporting elements. They're easier to track than a cargo hauler, observed Commander Yoon from his station. No deception, no misdirection, no tactical surprise. They announced their attack plan 6 hours before launch. Captain Nam Min-ho studied the alien formations through his binoculars. The Mordian ships approached their targets in perfect lines, maintaining communication discipline that would have been admirable for a parade but was suicide for a combat operation. "Sir," asked Bae Hyun-woo, "should we warn the Thexara about the incoming attack?" "Our orders are to observe only," Nam Min-ho replied. But then he made a decision that surprised everyone. Communications transmit a general navigational update on an open channel. Include current positions of all vessels in the area for safety purposes. It was a routine transmission that happened thousands of times per day throughout the galaxy. But the timing meant that Thexara forces received detailed information about Mordian attack routes 30 minutes before the battle began. The Thexara used this information to redeploy their fleets and ambush the Mordian attack force, destroying 12 ships in the first exchange. It was the most successful tactical action by any alien force since the conflict began. "Oops," said Nam Min-ho with satisfaction. Similar accidents began happening throughout the combat zone. Human ships providing routine assistance that gave one side advantages over another, navigation updates that led enemy fleets into asteroid fields, technical advisories that warned about dangerous equipment failures seconds before critical systems overloaded on hostile vessels. But Major Han Sung-ho was growing frustrated with such subtle methods. "Admiral, permission to speak freely," he requested during a tactical briefing aboard the Seoul. "Granted, Major." "Sir, this isn't warfare. This is assisted suicide. Yesterday I watched Velnari Marines attempt to board a Mordian cruiser using civilian airlocks. They didn't have cutting tools, breaching charges, or covering fire. When their magnetic clamps failed to work on alien hull materials, they politely requested permission to surrender." Admiral Choi Sun-mi studied the tactical reports from across the conflict zone. Every engagement showed the same pattern. Alien forces trying to implement military strategies they had read about but never practiced, using equipment designed by engineers who had never seen combat, led by officers who treated warfare like an academic exercise. "How many casualties in the last engagement?" she asked. 4,000, ma'am," reported Commander O.J. Sung, but most died from equipment failures, navigation errors, and friendly fire incidents. "The aliens are killing themselves faster than they're killing each other." Dr. Park So-young had spent the week analyzing captured alien communications and intelligence reports. Her findings painted a picture that was both sad and terrifying. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of enemy capabilities," she announced. "The conclusion is disturbing. Every military doctrine in our historical databases, every strategy, every tactic, every innovation in the art of warfare, traces back to human origin points. The galaxy learned how to fight by studying human conflicts from our pre-peace era." "What do you mean?" asked Commander O. "The Velnari battle formations are modified versions of human naval tactics from our colonial expansion period. The Mordian siege strategies come from human planetary assault doctrines. The Thexara infiltration methods are based on human special operations manuals. They're all trying to recreate human warfare, but they only have the final results without understanding the thinking that created those strategies." The command center fell silent as the implications became clear. "They learned how to fight from us," Admiral Choi Sun-mi said slowly, "and then we stopped fighting while they forgot how to learn." "Yes, ma'am," Park So-young confirmed. "Humanity wasn't just another warrior species that gave up fighting. We were the warrior species. Everyone else learned from our example, then lost the knowledge when we chose peace. The crisis reached its peak when long-range sensors detected the Star Render facility coming online. The ancient weapon began drawing power from the Velnari homeworld's core, creating space-time distortions that could be measured from neighboring star systems. "Admiral," reported the sensor officer, "the Star Render will reach full activation in 18 hours. At current power levels, it will create a cascade reaction that consumes everything within a 40-light-year radius." Choi Sun-mi looked at her crew and saw something that had not existed in human military forces for 3,000 years. Officers ready for real combat against a genuine threat. Communications. "Open a channel to President Seo Min-ji." The president appeared on screen, her face grave with the weight of decision. "Admiral, the Council has made an unprecedented request. They want humanity to take complete command of the situation, full military authority over all forces in the region, Madam President, that would mean, yes, Admiral. For the first time in 3,000 years, they're asking us to wage war. Admiral Choi Soon-mi felt the last restraints of peaceful civilization fall away like old clothes that no longer fit. Around her, the crew of the Soul prepared for something their species had not done for millennia: the systematic application of violence to achieve strategic objectives. Understood, Madam President. We accept full command authority. When the transmission ended, Admiral Choi Sun-mi looked at the tactical display showing 14 billion lives threatened by alien incompetence and ignorance. She smiled the smile of a predator that had been patient for far too long. Major Han, prepare all Marine units for immediate deployment. Commander O, recall the entire human fleet to battle formation. Dr. Park, I need complete psychological profiles on all enemy commanders within 4 hours. Admiral, asked Communications Officer Lee Soo-jin, what about the other species? What do we tell their fleets? Choi Sun-mi studied the chaotic battle formations of 17 different species who had forgotten that warfare was something you practiced before you needed it. Tell them, she said quietly, that humanity is done watching children play with fire. Operation Nightfall began at 03:00 standard galactic time with a lesson that the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity did not wage war the same way as everyone else. Captain Lee Dae-ho and his crew had spent 3 days infiltrating Velnari space not as diplomats or observers, but as something the modern galaxy had no word for: spies. They moved through enemy territory like ghosts, using stealth technology that existed in no database and tactics that appeared in no textbook. Commander Kim Taemin, what's the status on the Star Render facility? Lee Dae-ho asked. Complete intelligence package ready, sir, Kim Taemin replied, displaying 3 days of reconnaissance data: security rotations, personnel schedules, technical specifications, psychological profiles of key operators, backup power systems, communication networks, and emergency protocols. We know everything about their operation. Dr. Park So-young looked up from her analysis station. Captain, we've identified the facility's critical weakness. The Velnari are using the Star Render exactly backwards. They think it's a weapon, but it's actually a stellar engineering tool. If we can convince the operators that they're about to destroy their own homeworld instead of saving it, they'll shut it down themselves. Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-woo smiled as she uploaded new data to the ship's computers. I've prepared information packages that show them what the Star Render actually does, but we need to get this data to their chief scientist, Dr. Veltheracane, without anyone realizing it came from us. Lee Dae-ho felt the satisfaction of a hunter who had studied his prey perfectly. Begin psychological operations. Make them believe they discovered the truth themselves. Across the galaxy, Major Han Sung-ho was preparing for humanity's first military action in 3 millennia. But his mission was not what anyone expected. Marines, listen carefully, he told his assault team aboard the transport ship Incheon. Our target is the Star Render control facility, but we're not going to fight our way inside. We're going to walk through the front door and convince everyone to surrender before they realize they're under attack. Sergeant Cho Min-jung checked her equipment loadout. Instead of heavy weapons and armor, she carried medical supplies, emergency rations, and translation devices. Sir, how do we capture a fortified position without firing a shot? By being more civilized than the enemy, Han Sung-ho replied. The Velnari have never seen real soldiers before. They've never experienced professional military psychology. We're going to show them what happens when people who actually understand warfare decide to end a conflict. The assault began with something that had never happened in galactic history. An enemy, force that announced itself. Politely, Velnari Star Render Control, this is Major Han Sung-ho of the Human Marines. He broadcast on open channels as his transport approached the facility. We're here to discuss the immediate shutdown of your weapon system. Please prepare to receive a diplomatic delegation. The Velnari defenders were so confused by this approach that they actually opened their docking bay and allowed the human transport to land. They had been expecting an attack, not a conversation. Han Sung-ho walked into the control facility accompanied by 12 Marines who looked more like peace negotiators than soldiers. They offered medical assistance to wounded defenders, brought emergency supplies for the facility's staff, and politely requested a meeting with the ranking commander. This is unprecedented, whispered the Velnari facility commander to his aide. The humans sent soldiers who want to help us instead of hurt us. Within 2 hours, Major Han Sung-ho had convinced the entire Velnari garrison to stand down through a combination of professional courtesy, genuine concern for their welfare, and the subtle demonstration that resistance was pointless. Against people who understood warfare better than they understood breathing, the Star Render was shut down without a single shot being fired. But the real demonstration of human capabilities was happening in space, where Admiral Choi Sun-mi had decided to end the Outer Veil conflict permanently. All ships, commence Operation Clean Sweep, she ordered from the Bridge of the Soul. What followed was not a battle in any sense that the alien species understood. Human forces appeared everywhere at once, using coordination and tactics that seemed impossible to alien observers. They did not destroy enemy fleets. They captured them intact and turned them against their former allies. Commander Oh Jae-sung directed the space operation from his tactical station. Admiral, Phase 1 complete. We've isolated the Mordian fleet from their command structure and offered them safe passage home if they stand down immediately. They're accepting. Phase 2 status? Thexara forces have been surrounded by their own former allies, who are now under human coordination. They've requested individual peace negotiations. Dr. Park So-young coordinated the psychological operations from her analysis station. Admiral, our intelligence reports show that most alien commanders are more afraid of being embarrassed than being killed. We're offering them ways to surrender that preserve their dignity while eliminating their capability to continue fighting. The efficiency was breathtaking. Human forces moved through the combat zone like surgeons excising a tumor, separating hostile elements and neutralizing threats without unnecessary destruction. They used the aliens' own peaceful nature against them by offering medical aid to wounded enemies, safe evacuation routes for civilians, and generous surrender terms for military forces. Captain Lee Dae-ho watched from his infiltration position as Velnari ships began broadcasting surrender requests on all frequencies. Admiral, the enemy fleets are standing down faster than we can process their surrender requests. They'd rather deal with human military forces than continue fighting each other. Understood, Captain. Begin Phase 3. Phase 3 was something that existed in no military textbook, because no species had ever been arrogant enough to attempt it. The simultaneous negotiation of separate peace treaties with 17 different hostile forces, while still conducting active combat operations against any group that refused to surrender. Admiral Choi Sun-mi coordinated the final phase from her command center, managing diplomatic negotiations, military operations, and intelligence gathering with the ease of someone who had been born for this work. The Velnari Empire has accepted our terms and requests to become a human protectorate, reported Communications Officer Lee Soo-jin. The Mordian Federation and Thexara Collective have agreed to voluntary military disarmament under human supervision. What about the remaining 11 species? They're requesting emergency sessions with human diplomatic representatives. Apparently, they prefer negotiating with us to fighting each other. The Outer Veil conflict ended not with a final battle, but with a series of surrender ceremonies conducted across 17 different worlds. Human forces accepted the capitulation of alien fleets that had been shooting at each other just days before. President Seo Min-ji addressed the Galactic Council from Earth's capital, her words carrying across the galaxy to every civilized world. You asked us to end your war, she said simply. We have ended it. You asked us to restore peace. We will maintain it. But understand this, the Pax Galactica is over. Welcome to the Pax Humana. In the aftermath, Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, watching alien surrender ceremonies across 17 worlds. His crew gathered around him, archaeologists and historians who had discovered they were something else entirely. Sir, asked Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-woo, what do we do now? Lee Dae-ho looked out at the stars, feeling something that had been missing from human hearts for 3,000 years, the satisfaction of apex predators who had remembered their place in the natural order. Now, he said, and his smile was the expression of a species that had spent millennia being patient. Now we wait for the next group of people foolish enough to think that 3,000 years of peace made us soft. His grin widened as he considered the implications. And then we teach them why humanity ruled the galaxy before we chose to share it. The galaxy had learned a new truth that humanity had not abandoned war because they grew tired of fighting. They had abandoned war because there was no one left worth fighting. But after 3,000 years of peace, war had returned, and humanity had never been happier.